Welcome, Lauren. Thank you for taking the time to be chatting to EcoResolution today. For everyone who is watching, Lauren Singer is a pioneer of the zero waste movement and has been inspiring people across the world through her blog, Trashes for Tosses, as well as supporting people in making the transition towards more sustainable lifestyles via her online shop, Package Free. It's so amazing what you've done, Lauren, and I keep hearing such cool things about you and like really inspiring tips that you've been sharing. I'd love to hear what catalyzed you into taking such transformative action.
Sure. I mean, I wasn't always passionate about sustainability. I was always really connected with nature. As a kid, I mostly spent time by myself outside. We lived in a place where there was a lot of land, and so I was always playing with nature. And I always felt like a connection and a calm outside. And then when I was in high school, I got really passionate about social justice, and that's where I got into activism and protesting. And then my last year of high school, I read the book Silent Spring by Rachel Carson. It's all about the effects of DDT, a man-made pesticide, on bird populations, people, and the environment. And it was the first time in my life, actually, that I realized that human beings are the only species on Earth that have the capacity to destroy the planet for everything else that lives here. No other creature on Earth can do that. And it made me feel really scared of people. But it also made me feel really powerful in a way, because if we have the ability to do something that's so bad and so destructive, maybe we have the power to do something that's really good. So I ended up going to NYU for college, and I decided to start studying environmental science. And through studying environmental science, I ended up getting really depressed. So when you study environmental science, basically all you're learning about is how horrible human actions are on the planet and how effectively doomed our Earth is. For me, it was really tolling. I found myself feeling really sad all the time. I felt like I had this passion for wanting to do something positive, but I didn't have any way to do something. Like, I was just one person, and I didn't know what type of an action I could take to make a difference. And then my junior year of college, I saw Josh Fox's documentary called Gasland, which was all about the effects of hydrofracking. And like reading Rachel Carson's book, that documentary again showed me that human actions can create so much destruction and so much negative action that's not just, momentary, but it lasts and lasts and lasts for such a long time. And that's where I really found my voice in activism. So I found myself going out and protesting all the time. I started student groups to try to raise awareness around fracking, and we're really lucky that it was banned in New York State, but that's not the case for everywhere. So that's really how I started finding my voice. But something that I didn't like about activism was that I felt like it came from such a place of anger. And it's fair to be angry about these things, right? Like, hydrofracking is a terrible process that's terrible for the environment, terrible for people who are affected by methane. But at the same time, like, anger can only do so much. And so my last year of college, I was in the last class that you take as an environmental studies student. And there was a girl in my class who had also been in the program for 4 years. And every day she would come to class with this like big plastic bag with a plastic container of food and a plastic fork and knife and a plastic bag of chips. And she'd eat everything and then just throw it in the trash. And I thought it was so weird that someone who cared about sustainability as much as she did, and probably as much as I did, that she would make so much plastic trash every single day. And I would judge her and just like stare at her and think that she was this really bad person. But then one day I went home to make dinner after class, and I saw that for the first time, I had so much plastic in my house. Everything in my refrigerator was packaged in plastic. All of my, cutting boards and kitchen utensils. And then in my bathroom, it was all of my beauty products and my cleaning products. And in my closet, I was wearing fast fashion at the time. So it was all made of synthetic fibers. And I realized that I had been protesting against the oil and gas industry for, years at this point. But at the same time, the decisions that I was making every single day through what I was choosing to consume were directly contributing to and subsidizing this industry that I hated so much. And I realized that I was totally a hypocrite and that I needed to make a change in my life. So I made the decision to stop using plastic, like pretty much cold turkey. And I said to myself that I was going to walk to the pharmacy and go inside and buy everything that I used, but without plastic, as if it was like something that I had just chosen not to do before. But when I got into the pharmacy, I realized, as you can imagine, that there were 0 things without plastic. Like you couldn't find toothpaste, no deodorant, no face wash, no moisturizer, no hair products, nothing. And I realized that I couldn't just buy my way out of using plastic. And so I had to learn how to make my own products. So I started making things like my own toothpaste, my own laundry detergent and cleaning products. And through that process, I learned about the zero waste lifestyle. And the reason that the zero waste lifestyle it lit me up so much was because it was the first time that I realized I had the power as an individual to take control over my impact on the planet. Because I believe the choices that we make every day have a positive or a negative impact. And realizing that I could choose which one I was having was so empowering. So it was really the first time in my life that I learned to live my day-to-day life in alignment with my values for environmental sustainability.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you for sharing that. I mean, there's so many like threads in that I'd love to pick up on. I really want to ask you like specific questions about living a zero waste life. But before I do, I just want to touch on like how I really love how your story of change and like of transformation really started from the perspective of social justice and how that's what led to the environment. Because I think often environmentalism and human rights are seen as 2 separate kind of categories, and that people who, you either focus on one or the other. It's either feminism or it's the environment, so like as examples. And I think the more that we can start to see how interconnected things are, the more we can start to take more like transformative action that affects the systems as well. And me and my sister, who the directors of EcoResolution, we also run something called Advaya. And for us, a really big space that we're exploring right now is the place of anger, and like what's at the root of our actions when we come into like a world of activism and change making. And that like while anger is like a really important emotion and feeling for us to have in order for us to know that something isn't just, and like feel like the energy to take action, when we start to like run on anger, we start to get burnout, we start to be recreating the same systems of oppression and like dominance and like fear and anger that have like actually caused the problems that we're facing.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. And what you say also about about it's kind of like I feel like in our life, we're kind of always presented with different options, not always, but like, day to day, there's like different options, and that, we can become empowered by realizing that even if it's like, it seems like a small decision, the effects of our actions are so great. Because, if you look at like a plastic bottle of shampoo, you don't see the oil spills in the landfill and the Pacific garbage patch. You don't see like the stories behind it, the communities who are impacted by these like international waste wars that are going on.
You would love a new campaign that we just launched on Package Free, where you can shop by solution. So basically, like, what are the things that you're passionate about in the environment? Is it ocean pollution? Is it deforestation? And we break it down so that you can actually make tangible switches in your routine that contribute to not feeding this problem that you don't like. So we try to show like, these problems seem so large, but there are little tiny choices that you can make today that actually help to solve them.
Yeah, exactly. And I just think the more we can focus on solutions, really, the better, because the solutions are out there. It's just we need like the momentum, political will, and like the individual change of heart to be able to kind of embrace and act upon them.
One of the moments I realized that there were a couple of things, but one was, watching a documentary, right? You get a documentary is made to fire you up about things. It makes you feel angry or excited, makes you want to take action. But then the documentary ends. There's no suggestions for tangible ways to take action. And then you just feel shitty and depressed. And I think that anger and that fire, if not catalyzed into something that can create a tangible impact, it almost creates like apathy and inactivity. So that's why for me, like, there was a time when I was studying environmental science and I was learning about all this stuff, and I was feeling so angry and so impassioned, and I'd be like, Mom, you have to change the way you're eating. You have to change the way you consume energy. You have to buy this, not buy this. And she, after a certain time, stopped picking up the phone because she's like, this is so annoying. All this girl is doing is telling me why I'm such a bad person and why all of my choices are wrong. And nobody wants to be judged for the way that they're living their lives right now, right? We're all trying to do our best. But something that I realized is that the world that we're presented to, like that's presented to us, the options that we have that are like right in front of our faces, it's not the only world we have to live in. There are choices that we can make. A part of what I'm doing with Package Free is helping to make those choices easier and more convenient for people. But we have the ability to live in a way that's not like this mass consumeristic way, but where we can also uphold the quality of our lives and like the convenience of our lives. And so with my mom, I realized when I was judging her and otherizing her and making it seem like everything she was doing was wrong when she was simply just living in this world that is created and convenient for us, she blocked me out. But then when I realized I needed to stop judging people and otherizing people because I myself cared about the environment, but didn't know how to live in alignment with that, I realized that just by living my values, I could help people see another way of living without telling them they have to live that way. So my mom always said, you can't change people, but you can inspire them to do differently. And I think by living my values and by, being positive about the things that I'm doing, as opposed to making people feel shitty for the way that they're not living, it's helped to encourage people to make different choices in their life in a way that I don't think I ever could have had I led with anger.
Yeah, it's definitely about trying to live as much by example as possible. And like for clarity, so zero waste means that you don't produce garbage, you don't send anything to landfill, you don't throw anything in the trash. Or the bin, as you say in England. And, but it does mean that you recycle. So you do recycle those. So, and like for me, recycling is like a troublesome topic area because I feel like, like a lot of the kind of plasters on a gaping wound that governments try and give us and corporations is like, you can buy everything, but you just need to recycle it. When actually, I know in my borough, in my area, most of the things that I put in the recycling bin won't even get recycled in the end. So, I've only just started to do this, but now I'm starting to see recycling not as like my best option, but as like the like kind of last option. So if I can't reuse something, if I can't reduce, if I really need it, make sure that it is recyclable. But how do you kind of go about like recycling and the complexities behind it and greenwashing?
I mean, I think of it the same way that you just said. I think of recycling as a last resort. So, I'm doing a lot of recycling now with quarantine and COVID because I bought things like canned food. So it's really the first time in a long time that I'm actually contributing to recycling again. But it's important to remember that the process of recycling is super energy intensive, super water intensive, and super chemical intensive. So it's not like this, you put something in the recycling bin and then poof, it's like a new can again and it's clean and perfect and there was no impact in the process of doing it. Like that's not true. In addition to that, so much of what's sent to recycling isn't actually recycled and it's sent to landfill. That's not to say you should be discouraged to recycle. You should always recycle in a way where you'd expect 100% of things to be recycled. Like I don't think a failure of a system should predispose like inaction. I really believe in living in alignment with your values to the extent that you'd hope that everyone else is doing the same. But that being said, there are so many preventative ways to not even have to get to the point where you have to recycle something. And that's why I believe in the power of reusables. And that's really like the fundamental like thing with Package Free. It's like, how do you prevent waste from even becoming?
Yeah, exactly. It's interesting, like you mentioning, within the context that we're in now of Corona and the limitations, I feel like it is a really stark reminder that the context that we find ourselves in often dictates what's actually possible. And, a lot of like environmental rhetoric around like lifestyle changes are often criticized because they're seen as like, a lot of the time they are inaccessible. For example, we just did a food and farming month and, looking at, organic food being the best option, obviously, or food that's from like agroecological environments. But yeah, it's just interesting realizing how like the context that we're in really like predisposes,
yeah. No, 100%. Look, I mean, talking about privilege is a privilege, right?
Yeah.
But if you're in a position where you do have privilege, which so many of us in first world countries do, if you have the privilege of choice and you're not making choices that are more sustainable, then is that bad? And part of me thinks, yes, if you have the ability to choose one thing over another, and that one thing contributes to a more just, more equitable, more sustainable future, and the other fuels this consumeristic, pollution-driving industry, you know, is that wrong to choose one over the other? And I think, yes, it's important to recognize privilege, because when you do that, you realize that your power as an individual to make change, not just in your own life, but to drive a whole industry that can increase privilege to other people. For me, you know, from the lens that I'm looking through, or, you know, when I started focusing on environmental sustainability, this was 10 years ago, hardly anyone was talking about it. There were no jobs in sustainability. There was no real community. It was mostly just activists. And it was a very niche, like, you know, dreadlock, your stereotypical like hippie person. And that's an amazing community. And I'm so grateful because they're on the front lines of all problems that are facing the planet. But in a way, it's isolating for other people who might align with sustainability. But as sustainability and the narrative around things like zero waste and, you know, regenerative and sustainable farming, as those things have continued to grow and gain popularity, access to sustainability now is objectively easier than ever before. It's more accessible than ever before. That's not to say that it's accessible to everyone. By no means is it. It is still in so many circumstances, a privilege to have access to sustainability, or even to have the privilege to think about it. But it is, without a question of a doubt, more accessible now than it ever has been in the past. In terms of like our modern consumeristic world, right? If we go back a couple of generations, most people were living sustainably because there wasn't an inundation of plastic. There wasn't hyper consumerism because it was, you know, coming off of the back of a war. People were doing things more responsibly because that's what the circumstance, to your point, dictated, right? So circumstance so often dictates the way that we consume as a society. And I think something that's so interesting right now is you know, everyone is consuming so much less because of our circumstance, which is really amazing. And I hope that this experience encourages people to think about, you know, the way that they live their everyday lives, because we don't need to consume as much as we do. We can spend more time at home, do things like cooking, make our coffee ourselves and not have to get a single use. And I hope that this experience encourages people to slow down. And by participating in more sustainable practices, the more people of privilege that do that, the more accessible it becomes to other people. These things scale because people partake in them. So you can't be mad at people who have privilege that are partaking in things that are sustainable. It should be encouraged because that's how it becomes more accessible. The more people that do something, the more convenient it gets. The lower the price point, the lower the barriers to access.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, when we think about the fact that from the 1950s, I think 9.1 billion tons of plastic have been produced. And, you know, the exponential rate in which our waste is growing. It's just so important that, as you say, if we have the choice and it's available to us, to take that time in order to make sure that we can shift to like more sustainable practices into renewables.
It comes down to what your values are, right? Like if you don't value environmental sustainability, then it makes sense why you wouldn't prioritize those choices. But I think a really important thing that people need to think about more, and I hope they're thinking about more now, is what is it that I value? What do I care about? And am I living in alignment with that? So whether it's caring about farming, caring about, you know, children, caring about, you know, people that live in third world countries and, you know, access to clean water, all of these systems are so much more complex, like to your point earlier. Choices that we make for something like sustainability impact people that live in third world countries. Climate refugees are going to be one of the biggest demographics that is growing. And it's because of things like climate change and because of the way that we consume, because of the food that we eat, because of the amount of trash that we create. So So it's important to recognize that all of these things are connected. So it might just seem like one small choice to like eat meat or consume plastic, but those choices, when multiplied by the amount of people that do them, create the reality that we live in. And if you're not happy with the reality that we live in, then you should change the way you live.
Yeah, I completely agree. And what would you say like is a really good starting point, or kind of like 5 tips for anyone who's wanting to start to address their waste issues?
For me, something that I used to say was like, first start by looking in your garbage can and seeing what see what you're throwing away. But actually, I want to step back and take it one further, is to the point that I just made, like, stop and think about what your values are. What do you care about? What's important to you? And what contribution do you want to have in the world? Like, if you looked back on your life, what would you like to say the impact that you had or didn't have is? And I think understanding that is essential to becoming a more conscious person as you go through your life. So I would say first, recognize your values, see what you care about, and ask yourself if you're aligning with them. And then, for me, when it comes to waste, which is what I focus on, because landfills are one of the biggest drivers of methane, and methane is more potent than carbon dioxide in driving climate change. So that's why I focus on landfill waste, because it's one of, I think, the lowest hanging fruits that we as individuals can change to have a positive environmental impact. So look in your garbage can, see what you're throwing away, and see if there are any things that there are easy solutions for. So if you notice you're throwing away a lot of, cotton balls or cotton swabs, there are alternatives to that. We sell a reusable cotton swab at Package Free. We sell washable cotton pads. Even if you don't want to buy something, you can make them yourself. You can use an old towel and cut them into rounds and use those and wash them instead of buying single-use products. So there are so many solutions to the things that we throw away. I've found a multi-use alternative to just about every single-use product that I used to consume. And that's so much why I started Package Free, because I wanted to make those tools easier for people to find, because they used to not even be accessible at all. And now there's a place where you can find them. And sure, the price points are higher than their conventional alternatives, but if you do, to our point before, have the ability and have the income to invest in them, they end up saving you money over time, because, you can buy one thing that lasts the lifespan of maybe 3, dollar purchases for a single use item. And then you end up saving so much money over time.
What has been like the biggest challenge with shifting to a zero waste lifestyle?
So for me, I think it hasn't been challenging for me. The biggest thing was really finding all of the alternatives to the single-use products. So in the beginning, it was hard to do, but it was a fun challenge, because this is something, living a zero-waste lifestyle is not something that I'm doing because like someone is telling me to. It's because I feel an inherent need to live in alignment with my values. And so, it was hard in the beginning to find, the right recipe for toothpaste. I had to make like 400. I had to teach myself how to make laundry detergent. I learned how to cook so many things that I didn't know how to cook. So there was a big learning curve for things like that. But so I would say that was like a barrier to entry, but that's why I started Trashes for Tossers, to take all of the skills that I was learning and put them on a website and a blog where people could learn about them in a way that they didn't have to do all the research that I did. And then I think the other one is the actual preconception that living a sustainable lifestyle is hard or like exclusionarily expensive. I started when I was 20 years old. I was in college. I didn't have disposable income or like disposable money at all. And living a zero waste lifestyle allowed me to save so much money that I was able to quit my job and start my first company. So the choices that you make for the environment end up having a much larger positive impact in terms of, having control over the ingredients that you're putting in and on your body and helping you to save money.
Yeah, I actually have found that as well. I've been making like a real effort to be like very aware of like what it is that I'm buying and like what impact it's having. But like that's probably like 50% of the time when I'm like in a supermarket, like I'll buy something that's got plastic on it, and it's just like, it's those like slips of consciousness. But like if I were to like really be conscious as I shopped, I know I'd be able to like work around the things and like replace what it is I do want that comes in plastic or with packaging by like making something myself. But last July I did the plastic free July with EcoResolution, and it was great because I learned how to make my own oat milk. I learned how to make my own deodorants and like all these different kind of like cool things that are actually really fun as well. And a lot of my work is now based on a computer. And so it's really nice to have like a good reason to kind of just like step away from that and get a bit more creative at home.
Totally. 100%. Yeah. And I think also like right now, while people are in quarantine, especially if you have kids, now's the time to learn how to do these things. Now's the time to develop those new skills that you can take into the world after Corona. Like you can learn how to make your own deodorant and your toothpaste. You can learn how to bake bread. You can learn how to make oat milk. You can learn how to sprout. All of these like homesteading things that people used to do before convenience culture was what it is today.
Yeah, I'm very interested in the connection between consumerism, the economy, and like our mental health and like well-being in general. And I've been like doing quite a bit of reading around this topic, and yeah, just seeing how like, you know, we're all like, our economy is like pushing us to produce more so that we can consume more. We're like spending more and more hours at work, having less time at home. So like the things that we used to be able to make, we now don't have time to make anymore, like our own bread, our own oat milk, our own cheese, our own butter, or whatever it is. And so it's just like this kind of weird like spiral where like we're having to make money so that we can buy the things that we wouldn't have to buy before. And it's kind of the same with like, you know, the degrading of like community ties as well. Like you used to be able to have communities that would like help with childcare and, you know, and babysitting and these things. But now like you have to pay like an arm and a leg to be able to get that kind of support. Yeah, it's like, I'm very like the, you know, beyond like the kind of like lifestyle shifts and like the environmental impact, just thinking about it on like a collective level of like, what does like waste and consumerism like represent within our culture, and like how can we kind of try and like take the initiative and like control back over our own lives so that in order we can nourish the things that actually really mean a lot to us, which is probably like time and creativity and family and relationships. And yeah.
It's so interesting that Corona really has created that space. It's a new way that none of us in the like technological world have experienced, right? But now so much of us have a surplus of time that we've never had before. So we're able to, you know, work our 9-to-5 jobs, right? We're able to connect with people because of technology. We're able to still have this community, even though it's not physical, which is hard. But then we're also able to have the surplus of time to do things like learn new skills, bake our own bread. It's like, in a way, this really beautiful smashing of two worlds, right? It's like the way people used to do things when there was a surplus of time, and the way people are doing things with like the amount of technology that we have. And it's kind of brought the two together for the first time ever in a way. And it's to me, it's really exciting and really beautiful.
Really exciting. We just started our own compost at home, which I'm really excited about. And I know this is something that you speak a lot about, because someone on our team, Charlotte, was saying, when I mentioned that we were going to be doing the interview, she was like, "Oh, Lauren's changed my life. She told me about being able to put compost in my freezer. Can you tell me about that?"
I have so much compost in my freezer. Like so much. I actually, the new person that I'm dating, I taught him how to compost, and it's been so crazy because he hasn't taken out the trash once since we started composting, which is really amazing.
Yeah.
But to me, like if there's anything, you know, you asked before, what are the ways that people can start reducing waste? And right now it's, you know, it's hard to do a lot of things like find alternatives to single-use plastic, especially because you're not able to go to lots of different stores and, you know, find alternatives. You know, we do have package free and we ship everywhere. But, you know, one thing that I suggest to people, it's like, if you want to do one thing that's one action that makes a huge, huge difference, it's composting. And the reason for that is kind of a point that I made before. Why are landfills bad, and why is throwing food into a landfill bad? People think that if you take food and you throw it into a landfill, it's like, oh, it's okay, it'll just biodegrade. But then it's the question of like, but where does it go? Because how a landfill works is it's a big hole in the ground that's basically sealed with plastic around it. And things like trash and food and furniture and diapers and cigarettes and like all these things are piled and piled and piled on top of each other, and it squeezes all of the oxygen out. So when there's no oxygen and you have things that would break down, they don't break down in a way that's called aerobic digestion, which is digestion with oxygen. It breaks down in a way called anaerobic digestion. So when you put food, something that would be natural and break down, into a system in anaerobic digestion, what happens is it makes methane. And methane gas is more potent than carbon dioxide as a greenhouse warming gas over the time frame where scientists estimate that the catastrophic effects of climate change will occur. So for me, that's why I focus on methane and not carbon dioxide as my metric for environmental sustainability, because carbon dioxide is definitely more powerful over a long time frame, but the changes that are going to affect our planet in a catastrophic way aren't happening in a long time frame. They're happening within 11 years, 10 years. They're happening now. And so the way to tackle that is to tackle methane. And the three drivers of human-made methane or anthropogenic methane are landfills, natural gas, so fracking, so fighting against and protesting against the oil and gas industry, and fracking is actually really important for climate change. However, it's harder to control because we don't have that much control over where our energy comes from. And then the third one is animal agriculture. So if you can and you have the ability to not eat meat, that's one of the best things that you can do as well to decrease methane. So for me, the lowest hanging fruits are not sending trash to landfill and not eating meat.
Yes, I love that. Thank you. I feel really, this conversation's allowed me to feel really like reinvigorated by like the kind of excitement and curiosity that I can have by like trying to navigate a zero waste lifestyle. And I really appreciate your like very positive and solution oriented take on it all. I would love to ask you one more question. And that is like, what kind of makes you, so you said at the beginning about how, you know, like studying the environment as your major, and, you know, the kind of like depression that you went into, which we all feel. I'm sure that you probably still feel it at times as well. But like, what sustains you and like carries you forward? Kind of what motivates you in the work that you do with zero waste lifestyles?
You know, when I was feeling my most down was when I was trying to change the whole world, right? Thinking that I was going to change everything around me and solve climate change by trying to convince everyone and, you know, protest against everything. And when I changed my perspective from judging other people and trying to change other people to being introspective and looking at myself and aligning with my values every single day, I was able to break down so much of that sadness, so much of that depression, because I'm constantly asking myself, am I living in a way that creates the world that I want to live in? Am I aligning with my values every single day? And if I am, it gives me that optimism that I can, you know, help to live my values, welcome people into my life and show them that there are other ways to live. But for me, I know I can only control myself. And so if I'm living in alignment with my values, I know that I'm doing everything in my power to create the impact that I want to see. That's kind of what helped me so much. I think people feel sad when they try to make other people change, or they try, you know, to move a boulder up a mountain, so to speak. Because it's hard to see the tangible results of your efforts, right? You can scream so loud and hold up signs, and protesting and all those things are so important, but I think they need to be coupled with little wins. And zero waste to me, every time I use something that's reusable and not a single use thing, that's a win. That's like that dopamine that I need to continue going. It's like, I like to celebrate all aspects of the things that I'm doing to reduce my waste. And it's something that happens every day because we're consuming every single day. So I think focusing on the little wins has been so important for me. But you know, it's hard. I think there are moments where I had a big moment of like emotional crisis when the fires in Australia were happening, because they're so far from me and I'm so disconnected from them in so many ways. But then to your point earlier, when I started looking at this problem and breaking it down and asking, what is it that creates these fires? It's things like climate change. It's things like deforestation. What are the drivers of these things? And then when I broke it down, it's like, okay, plastic pollution leads to climate change, which creates these fires. So if I need to make sure that I'm, reducing plastic. Methane from putting food in landfills creates climate change that leads to fires, So making sure that I'm doing these little things so that I'm not contributing to this really shitty thing that makes me feel so sad. And it's about like taking that responsibility like we were talking about.
Yeah, I think big part of like the work that I do like on a personal level as well as through Advaya and EcoResolution is like trying to reposition kind of environmental climate action away from this like sacrificial space to more like towards something more like joyful and empowering and about like action and like education and sharing, because what is a real sacrifice is us kind of sacrificing our ability to be free thinking agents within this world and making like decisions that create greater harmony and like thriving life around us. So like for me, kind of when I try and shift out of that, like it's a sacrifice to not be able to buy that thing that like for some reason I have the desire to buy. It's actually like, no, like I'm making an empowered decision that I don't need that and therefore I am free from that. And I quit my EcoResolution when we first started was to stop buying fast fashion. And it's been such a liberating experience because now I can walk down a high street and I don't even look because it's just like a no, like I'm not allowed. And it's actually been really nice. And then I love going secondhand shopping now or like borrowing clothes off friends and stuff.
That's one of the things I miss most, actually. So someone was asking me like, what do you miss most about, being in the world? And I'm like, I miss going to the farmer's market and I miss going to my favorite secondhand store because I did it like every week. It gives me like calm to look through all the racks of chaos.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Okay, well, thank you so much, Lauren, for joining us.
Thank you so much.
I'm super inspired by all the work you do. And like, I'm now going to be following Trashes for Tosses religiously because I need some revamping of my zero waste skills.
Thanks. If you have anything you want to see, let me know. I'm ready to make new content.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye.